November 2014 is when this story actually starts. Late November 2014 is when Ford unveiled the Shelby GT350. At that time, I was in high school, and I really had no thoughts about Mustangs in general. I was a little indifferent about them. I liked them, but I didn't really see myself in a Mustang ever. At the time, I was driving around a Subaru BRZ. Fast forward about 5 months, it's now April 25th, 2015, and I convinced my dad to go to the Houston Auto Show with me, and there I saw my first Shelby GT350. That being the first time I saw one in person, again, I was just appreciating the visuals. I knew that people were, raving about the engine and transmission and all that, but at the time I really didn't know much better. I just thought it looked really, really cool, and that's all that was ingrained into my head. That's also at the time I was pretty convinced if I had to get a Mustang, it would certainly be a GT350, but I thought that before I realized it was better than the sum of its parts. But nonetheless, that's the state of 2015. Fast forward a little over a year past that, and that was the first time I saw a Shelby GT350 on the road. I'm checking my phone because I'm looking at the archives on the Instagram post I made. December 9th, 2016, I saw a lightning blue GT350 with black stripes. And here's my caption: the only Mustang that made me pull off the road to take a picture. This thing is gorgeous. Once again, going off the visuals, but it was so different, I guess, seeing it on video, then seeing it in person, than just seeing one out and about. It was really, really striking. I thought it looked like no other Mustang. And it was at that point I wanted to dive a little deeper and realize just what was so hot about a Shelby GT350. So I went on YouTube. It seemed like there just wasn't a single bad review of the GT350 from auto journalists that I really liked, that reviewed other cars that were pretty honest whenever they didn't like anything. Nobody seemed to have any faults with the GT350. And the things that they were saying were so great about it, I didn't fully comprehend. Why is a flat plane crank so great versus a cross plane? What makes one 6-speed manual better than another 6-speed manual? The only thing I knew is how it looked and how it sounded, and it seemed pretty cool to me. But the more I saw the videos, the more I started realizing this isn't just the Mustang I would buy, it's a Mustang I really wanted to buy. Couldn't really swing one at that point, so it just kind of went into the back burner for a dream car, and it all kind of stemmed from seeing one in person when it really started kicking off. Once I graduated high school, I knew I wasn't going to be going to college. That's just not me personally. And I was living with my parents, and they started planting the seed in my head, very appropriate of them, to start saving up for a house. They didn't mind a 19-year-old Brandon living with them, but they knew it would be very smart if I bought a house and bought one early. Even if I didn't live in it, it'd be smart as a 19-year-old to live with mom and dad, have low overhead, a low cost of living, and buy a house even if I just rented it out, have my first rental property. That would be very smart. I put a cork in all spending habits, and I started saving money quite quickly, just because living with your parents is a pretty cheap way to live, as it turns out. So I set a goal for myself to save $60,000 because I thought at the time that would be a good down payment for a house in the market at that time. Thinking a $300,000 house, put 20% down. Let's try to come up with $60,000 by the time I'm 20. That was the goal. The year is now 2017. I'm 19 years old, and I accomplished that goal of saving $60,000. I was proud of myself, but at the same time, I, for some reason or another, allowed myself to get home ownership anxiety before I ever bought a house. I wasn't even looking for one actively, and just the idea of purchasing a house and having a 30-year mortgage just scared me at the time. So I didn't buy a house. I instead, on July 21st, 2017, I walked into Mack Hike Ford Lincoln in Georgetown, Texas, and feasted my eyes upon this very car, a 2017 GT350 in lightning blue with the white stripes. I will say though, this was July of 2017, and I went in only to sit in the car. That's all I wanted to do. And I knew I wasn't gonna buy it because at the time they were asking $15,000 over MSRP, with the MSRP being $60,000 and change. So I knew I wasn't going to buy it, but sitting in it couldn't hurt. Not too long after being in the dealership, a salesperson approached me and asked if I needed anything, and I of course said I'm just looking around, but looking very specifically at this car. And I said that I wasn't in the market because of the markup, and he said if you're local, we could probably do $10,000 over sticker, and I knew this wasn't going to happen anyway, so I just want to sit in it and leave. He made it apparent to tell me before I left that actually the best they could do is $5,000 over MSRP, which is a little bit more tempting, and that's why I posted something on Instagram with the caption, tempting, ... Fast forward to the next month. It's now August 2017, and the wheels start turning to where I really did want to buy this car, and I knew it. I still didn't want to pay $5,000 over sticker, so I asked them if they would just sell the car for the MSRP, to which they said no. And so that was that for the time being. Then I realized the car wouldn't get out of my head. All I thought about was this car. I went to bed thinking about this car, and it just took up all of my mental capacity. So I thought my best bet is just to write a check for not $5,000 over sticker, but the price of the car plus $2,000 over sticker, which they verbally told me they wouldn't accept, but I hoped and crossed all my fingers and toes that they would accept it once it was in the form of a check. So unannounced, I showed up to the dealership with that check, and they said they'll sell it to me. And so that's what happened 6 years ago to the day. And so I was a 19-year-old who just bought a GT350 and lived with their mom and dad for a couple years preceding. But that's okay. Everything all worked out, and now it's got some company in my own garage, so it's all good. Hold judgment. But that's that. In case you guys never got the backstory, I thought I'd dive into it a little bit more. But nonetheless, guys, we're in year 6 of the GT350 ownership, and I have another bulletin list. Everything that you might want to know, whether you did or didn't see the previous videos. But before we even get to that, that was the little poetic story on how we got here. Hope you guys appreciated that. I'll give you the short story for the rest of it. The car 6 years later is still unbelievable, and it remains to be the last material possession I'd ever sell, period. A lot of it is to do with how great the car actually is, and a little bit of it is sentimental, because at one point this was everything I had ever owned. And so I think that's kind of funny. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. How has the car been for me in the last 6 years? I could try to be all poetic and tell you guys just how great it is and why it is. And you know what? We probably will at the end of this video. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and just go through this bulletin list. If you didn't see the video from 1 year ago, no need to go rewatch it. I'm just gonna hit you guys with the same things, but a little bit quicker this time. That way you guys don't have to watch 2 videos. So yeah, a lot has changed in the last year, not with this car in particular. In fact, if you saw that last video, there's really no major updates to tell you with this car 1 year later, but just garage kind of update in general. We'll make this quick as well. At the beginning of the video from last year, I mentioned how the Lotus Emira was still on order and being delayed. Yeah, quick little update on that. Canceled the Lotus Emira. Big shout out to High Tech Motor Cars in Austin, Texas. They gave me my $2,500 non-refundable deposit back with no fight, so appreciating that. The reason I canceled that, it was delay after delay after delay. I remember I put the money down like over 2 years ago, and it wasn't supposed to take this long, but that's not why I canceled it. The main one was I test drove it, and I was a little underwhelmed. Won't go too far into it because this is about the GT350. Anyway, Emira, not happening, and I'm okay with that. I also said how I had an order on a 2022 GT500 that didn't seem too promising. Well, that never happened. I bought a 2021 that was used September of last year, and the red truck got traded in on that. The tan truck got built up to be a mid-travel truck, and that's the garage update. GT350, obviously, still here and not going anywhere. That's the garage update and the housekeeping. Now let's dive into the GT350. 6 years and the mileage. Last time I told you guys the odometer reading of the GT350, I was met in the comment section by pitchforks and torches because people thought I don't drive it enough, and so my word is no good. All right, hear me out. The mileage after 6 years is a little over 14,000 miles. I know that's low relatively to like what would be a daily driver. And last time I told you guys the odometer reading, people literally said that my updates and opinions have no say because that's hardly any miles. We say that, but at the same time, we watch car reviewers that only have access to a car for 1 day and don't even put 100 miles on it, but we take their word seriously. So I like to think 6 years and 14,000 miles is certainly giving me some kind of light and perspective that someone who doesn't own the car has. Certainly because I pay for all the servicing as well, as we'll get into. So 14,000 miles is what we're at right now. What I've done to it, we'll start with that. It's got a different catback exhaust system, but it is from Ford Performance in collaboration with Borla. Literally, it's really no different than what would have been on a GT350R. That being said, factory exhaust minus the resonators. That's what's on this car. Grimspeed exhaust valve simulators. That way the exhaust valves just stay open because toggling that was annoying. Some front PPF done from Bespoke Paint Protection Film in Austin. Those guys are awesome. I did the oil separators from Ford Performance. I changed the air intake to a blue one. I think it's from Air Raid. I think it was in the Ford Performance catalog, so it's all kosher with them. 2017 GT350s, and I think 2018 as well, came with Michelin Supersport tires. Then after that, I think starting in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, they came standard with Cup 2 tires. The car currently is fitted with Cup 2 tires. Same with 295 in the front, 305 in the rear. Then I did a carbon fiber dash that the car did not come with, but my buddy with the GT350R made me very jealous because he had one, so I wanted to throw one in this. Problems I've had with the GT350. Nothing new from last year's update, thankfully, and last year's update was only one little problem. The only problem I had was about a year and a half ago, a small upholstery thing on the driver's side. A little piece of upholstery just popped out of place. I tried to put it back, couldn't do it. Dealership took care of it. I had to schedule something way far in advance, but once it was done, it's done, so no big deal. Good news is, after 6 years, that is the only problem that's popped up. And so in the last 1 year, nothing new. So yeah, little upholstery thing that's since been sorted. That being said, no oil consumption issues, thankfully, with my car. Some people have had that, not with mine, so I will take that. Speaking of oil, we'll talk about, this is the only thing, in fact, I'll mention on running costs, because everything can have its own variables depending on, how you drive your car, gas mileage, and what fuel cost around your area, your insurance. So forget all that. What I will say, though, is servicing it. Back in 2017, I did my first oil change with this at a Ford dealer. And for all of that oil and an oil filter, the service came out to a tick over $90. And at the time, it was considered kind of expensive. Any other vehicle would have set you back significantly less than that. So $90 for an oil change. However, the last time I changed the oil on this was at the same exact dealership, same exact process. And this time around, it was just a tick over $230. So quite a pricey oil change. Sure, a lot of people are going to argue, oh, just do it yourself, this, that, and the other. And they're probably right. It could be done cheaper if I did it myself or found a different shop. But I don't know, part of me is kind of fond of the idea that I bought it at a certain dealership and every service record is at that dealership. I don't know. I'm just kind of in my head about that. Just thought I'd tell you guys the service cost. That's something I do regardless of miles, at least twice a year. And so we're still under $500 a year for that servicing. And that's about it though. And so that is everything I wrote down on my list. And I'm sweating like crazy because it's 106 degrees out and my garage is not air conditioned. Thought I'd justify my sweat there. Sorry about that. Okay, but there it is, guys. Little backstory on why I even bought the car, how it's been over 6 years through just a bulletin list like that. But now if we're going to go into the theater about it, this car is really something special. And what I'm really impressed by, honestly, kind of going back to what I said about canceling the Amira order, is I think this car's guilty for a lot of that. This car's MSRP was $60,000, and the Lotus, the way it was going to be configured, was $96,000, and it just didn't seem to do 20% of what this car does for me anyway, as far as driver involvement. But I'm not here to compare this car with anything else. I just think this car is guilty for spoiling me, and now it takes a lot, I guess, to be impressed with the car enough to actually fork out the money for it nowadays. That's a lot to do with this car right here. And so that being said, I think that's really all I should talk about in my garage. I think kind of similarly to what I did last year, I went through everything that I should go over. Now we just hit the road with it, and I'll kind of tell you a little bit more about why I think it's so fantastic. It's the same spiel you guys hear every year. Nothing new, but who cares? Let's do it again. By the way, small garage update. Got these cool posters all throughout here. You could tell it's kind of Ford and Porsche I'm a big fan of. F40 is pretty cool too. But anywho, let's go ahead and make our way over here. Not necessarily a cold start, but should sound pretty good nonetheless. Also, sorry for the dip in quality. We're going to shoot this with the phone. Same as last time. Nothing's changed. Just because I'm lazy. We'll keep the door open. Start it up real quick. At this point, I don't really know I could tell you guys anything about the GT350 you don't already know, whether that be just specs about the car or just how great it is in my opinion. I guess I could really just lean on that because anyone can read some specs, go watch an actual analytical review, but I know that's not my strong suit. I know that after 14,000 miles and 6 years, here's the biggest thing I could say about this car, and I've said this every update I've done every year, but I guess the more that time goes on, the more it's impressive. And that is the fact that I really just cannot bring myself to replace this car. Not just because, like I said, it's a little sentimental, because at the time it was a financially irresponsible decision, but yet again, I have no regrets doing it. But really more than that, it's because the car is so great, to where, I'll put it this way, no disrespect to the cars I currently own right now, but ask yourself this maybe about a car you currently have, and you can kind of get an idea for how much you appreciate it. And that is, if you didn't have your car now, but you got paid exactly what you paid for it, how much of a rush would you be to go buy it again? The 2021 GT500, I've only had that for just under a year, so to be honest, I'm still loving that car, and I would probably go buy it again. But once again, I probably wouldn't be in a rush for it. If tomorrow morning this car was gone and in its place was the $60,000 I spent on it, I can guarantee you by the end of next week at the latest, there will be a GT350 in that garage. This is a car I really cannot see myself without. Again, part of it is that specific chassis number, because it's the one I bought new, and I think I really appreciate that 6 years later. But a lot of it, like I said, is because the car is so great. And so for that reason, if I didn't have this car and I had the money of what it's worth today or tomorrow, it wouldn't take long to have it replaced, just because the car puts that big of an impression to me personally. I think this goes for a lot of GT350 and 350R owners, is everyone that I know who has one of these is a massive Porsche fan, the GT3, GT3 RS series of cars. So with that being said, a manual GT3 or a Metzger engine era 997 GT3 RS is something that I think can maybe do what some of this car does, the same if not better, but you would hope so, because those cars are worth so much more than this. And so then again, it won't have quite the soundtrack. I'm not saying this sounds better than a GT3, but it is different, and nothing sounds like a GT350 like at all. It's just a totally different type of V8. That being said, that's the mentality. Are there better cars than this car? Sure, and when the time comes I could ever afford one, it's going to be an addition, not a replacement, because there's something so sweet about a GT350 and a 350R. That soundtrack 6 years later, as you could imagine, does not get old. I know everyone says that, but it's totally true. Yeah, in fact, just nothing about the car has gotten old. Cosmetically even. The newer GT500 looks great, but it's just different though. This one looks more cohesive, looks more elegantly designed, yet still pissed off Shelby. I think the design's awesome, the soundtrack's awesome, engine, transmission. I really can't see Ford ever making a car quite like this again. That doesn't mean they're not gonna make a car better, whatever that might mean for you. I just can't see them making a car like this, whatever that might mean. 2015 was the first year of the 350. It went all the way to 2020. But back in 2015, it was the most powerful, naturally aspirated V8 Ford's ever used. And now it's 2023, and it still is, which is pretty cool. So it may not be that way for long. The new GTs, S650 chassis, I think they're starting to creep up to that 500 horsepower mark with a dark horse, if I'm not mistaken. So they're not far off. This is 526 horsepower with no cheats, no supercharger, no turbos, nothing like that. And so still to this day, the most powerful naturally aspirated engine. And so that's pretty cool. But regardless of bragging points and that, it's just the driver involvement. It's really just the feel of it, and it's hard to convey. So I hope I'm doing a decent job with these videos. But guys, without going on and on, because I could easily make this too long of a video, I think I'll wrap it up there. That's the 6-year update. I know I've been slow to upload, and I always say that. So no promises I'll be more routine, but 2-year update with the GT500 coming soon, and then I'll start kind of rolling into the comparisons, comparing this with the new GT500, comparing the two old 500s together, maybe all three. So videos are planned. I'm just a bit busy, but I think I'm going to start rolling out content again soon. So that does it, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll go ahead and end it with one more teeny little poll here.